Gavin Fleming, welcome to the Decentralized podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to it. So, Gavin, you're the founder of the Tec Rec.
Yes, I am.
I think we're going to talk a little bit of recruiting, staffing, especially in the Web3 industry today.
Yep.
It's a hot topic. I mean, I've seen it in my own businesses. I'm seeing all of my clients struggle with it.
Yeah.
And I think as we go into more of a bull market, everyone's going to see the problems there. I wanted to kick off a little bit differently. And find out, how did you end up doing recruiting in the Cayman Islands? Because that's a very specific job to have.
It is, yeah. So I started my career in Glasgow, joined recruitment straight out of university. I think most people fall into this game, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But I loved it. I did quite well quite quickly. Joined the London agency on the tech side of things. Mm-hmm. That was where I got a real taste. For all things fintech, down there we worked with some very, very cool projects, and I always had an inkling to get away from the weather. The weather in Scotland is tough, so I was considering moving to the States in actual fact, and then I was contacted online, and whomever contacted me at the time was quite clever and included a video on YouTube of 7 Mile Beach, some horses, the ocean, and that was pretty much me sold. So the wife and I came here 2017. We'd actually never stepped foot on the island, so it was a bit of a leap of faith, but it has gone very well. We were very lucky to have great friends here, and it's been a wild ride. And then I left for a bit of travel. It was a little longer than I'd first had hoped, if I'm being honest, because of COVID, and set up the Tec Rec 3.5 years ago now, believe it or not. It's been a very quick journey, so it was good timing. We did see the boom coming to an extent on the crypto side of things, and wanted to position ourselves not to just be financial services focused. We still do dip in and out of various other traditional businesses, but I think we're at 90% crypto. So I refuse to leave until the government tell me to do so at this point, but it's a lovely place to live. And I think that we really are at the hub and the heartbeat of all things crypto in the world, which is very cool for such a small island to be ahead of the curve like that.
Yeah, no, really enjoying it. And I think that's a nice little first tip if you're trying to hire someone to come to Cayman, include a little video.
Yeah.
It's a nice convincer. You mentioned that you guys are 90% crypto. What is your day-to-day, and what is the Tec Rec focusing on? So what do you guys do?
At the moment, we are very much mired in the startup world in San Francisco. We've been pulled into a few different projects. They all sit within crypto. Some touch upon the AI side of things. Most pre-Series A, about to raise chunks of capital, and are in hyper-growth mode. So we typically get involved early on, mainly L1s, L2s. We don't really pick and choose. We're more than comfortable to work with most. But we focus on the harder to find areas. And typically at the moment, marketing, ecosystem growth are some of the absolute most talent short markets. So we've spent a considerable amount of time between there, Canada, and Europe. The talent game is very much global. Every single project that we work with is a fully remote business, so it throws up a lot of different issues, which we will get into a bit later, but very much focused on all things San Francisco at the moment. That there's a real excitement, I would say, in the market there for the amount of projects getting off the line. And I think it may be an issue coming into 2025, how we find the right talent for all of those projects, but it's a very exciting time for everybody, and it really is keeping us busier. I think Cayman will become, from the sounds of it, particularly since the election in the US, the number of projects that we've had come in is unbelievable. And all of them are looking to put boots on the ground. So we're very split between here, the US, Canada, and the European market from a crypto perspective.
And then, you just mentioned the talent shortage. I think that's something we're seeing as well, is finding the right people, getting the right people, and getting them to stay. I can sort of run through that. But when someone comes to you with a specific position, let's say it is head of growth, for example, how do you even start looking for that person and structuring the package for that person?
So, a lot of this comes down to market intelligence. We have been doing this for a while, so there has been trial and error a few years ago where we had to do this and build. It has now become a much more mature market, and we have successfully delivered for so many projects that the talent network that we now have is very expansive. And a lot of it, probably unlike more traditional markets, I couldn't tell you from the top of my head, but roughly I would say 85% of the talent we get is referred within their network. So it makes it It means that we ultimately bring a very unique talent pipeline to the table, right? And it's about going out, and I will say, crypto is one of those spaces at the moment where the talent is very specific about which projects that they want to work on. Unfortunately for me, they are, what's the idea? What's the long-term play here? What's the community involvement like? How is the engineering side of things set up? Have you had any turnover there? Is the tech ultimately sound? That has become a very, very important part of it. And that kind of ties into the employer branding side of things. So we are ultimately going out and delivering that message a lot of the time to some of the hardest to find talent. I would love for the talent to apply to a LinkedIn advert. That would make my life wonderful. But unfortunately, the best people are very much tied in. And unfortunately, the market learned from the 2022 run where vesting and token allocations have become a lot more sophisticated. They typically tie the best talent into the business for 3-4 years plus. So we are at that point now where there is so much money coming into the space. There are so many really, truly amazing projects getting off the ground. You have to have a very strong employer branding to be able to go out and get the people that you want. And that's where we come into it. And in order to start that process, it's the usual online, offline network, but predominantly network driven, I would say. At this point, I think that the number one piece for us has been track record. So a lot of the people that we work with, they have already delivered for multiple other projects. It removes an element of that risk. That's probably one of the key differences I see this time. Real focus on bringing in the absolute best of the best that have been there and done that to ensure that they're unlocking maximum value. But we do use a fair amount of AI as well in the background to help us cover globally. It's just myself and Ben Bailey ultimately. So we do use everything automation. I am an absolute fanatic of AI. I love it on a personal level. And that has been able to allow us to cover vastly more than we ever would have been, 5 or 6 years ago. So it has been it's been very interesting to see the world adapt. And that AI piece, again, we'll probably touch on a bit later, but for us, that has allowed us to really cover large parts of the globe quickly and been able to deliver the absolute best in talent, I would say.
Awesome. No, I think what you mentioned in terms of the project being appealing is also really interesting. I think this industry is unique in people are looking for a mission. They want to build something that means something.
Yeah.
It's not just a job for a lot of folks.
100%, yeah. I don't recall having those same issues with some of the big investment banks or the law firms. That I think typically it was more of a case of who paid the best, who had the best hours and flexibility. But there is the flexibility and the tokens, they're normally there. So it's, well, what are we actually trying to achieve here as a project? Are we solving something? Are we making the world a better place? That is typically some of what you will get. So it's very unique to crypto, I would say, on that side of things.
Awesome. And then you mentioned that you're looking for, experienced people that can show that they've done it. What is your screening process? So sort of what do you go through? How do you check them? Because a lot of these devs, especially, they're pseudo-anonymous.
Yeah.
So you don't even know what they've worked on. So how do you guys do that?
For that side of things, again, network referrals is very key. Whenever we meet any talent, we are very, very clear with them at the start that we will get to the end of the process and an offer will be made, but then references will normally have to come into it. That is key. I always look for 3 minimum that you've worked on for active projects. If NDAs need to be signed, that's absolutely doable so that there's no information issues, but we have to be able to do that. That combined with the fact, like I mentioned earlier, most of our talent is through the network. So we know people that have worked with them on projects that can specifically say, he is absolutely fantastic. We highly recommend him. Similarly, we had a smart contract engineer join one of our startups in Canada just recently from Coinbase, and it was the same thing. We were able to contact his superior, 2 above him, and all of them said the same thing. He is a guaranteed hire. So that is key, and I think to minimize that risk, the more information we have about what people they've interacted with internally as well as externally in the wider ecosystem, normally we can paint a very, very clear picture. There are times where some get through, I will say. We always make sure, but that is something that we'll talk about again a little bit later.
Well, that's an interesting one because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is you've got the hire a dev type websites that are out there. What are some of the challenges you've seen with those sites?
I don't know if you saw, there was quite a lot of rhetoric online because they are great. It unlocks a lot of talent. I do think there is a question mark about AML, KYC, and more importantly, who actually are these people that you're given access to a protocol or whatever it is. There has been well documented issues with the stealing of encryption keys and various other things. That is a very, very real issue for the market. And I think that has slowed down the hiring on the contracting side of things, where, Employer of Record, remote.com, deal.com are fantastic platforms. Hiring people on the other side of the world on these does have those risks. So I think when we saw those stories, for instance, we definitely did uptick and make sure that we were doing a little bit more. But our network is different. It's person-led and it's referred in person normally. So these are very much click behind the screen and you don't necessarily know what you get. I would advise all of my clients to avoid those, if I'm being honest, and to phone us first, of course. But it's a part and parcel of the industry. It is something that I think everybody has to be very aware of. We had a call with a client and they told me that they knew there was something wrong because he said, the dev said, I had an earthquake and I don't have any power, but he was meant to be living in Germany. And they're on the news, there was no earthquake in Germany. Cue them having an issue and saying, maybe he's not quite whom he says he is. So it is very important. I think that, simple things, for instance, like visual in-camera interviews, the amount of clients that we get introduced to whom have gone through 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, but they've never seen the person. That's a fairly basic red flag. So sometimes common sense can go a long way to look someone in the whites of their eyes and ensure who they are. From our side of things, as part of AML and KYC, from an onboarding due diligence, we do the criminal background checks and all of that stuff anyway. So it will normally flag up to us if we have any issues. But it's something that everybody has to be aware of in the market. It's not the easiest to deal with, and it is something to be aware of, but there are ways that we can mitigate. But due diligence through the hiring process and references are very much key.
No, I think it's a very high trust industry, and a lot of these are very small teams.
Yeah.
I want to get into the teams with you in a sec, but before we get into actually hiring people, what are you seeing with sort of package structuring, token allocations, all that? Because I think the models are changing at the moment compared to traditional.
I think that's probably where we spend the most of our time. The packages have definitely become considerably more token heavy. I think because, money's money, everybody needs cash, and that's one thing, right? And there's an element of, paying market rate, that's one part of the knife. But the reality is, back to our piece about employer branding and the right project, when we get that person and they believe it's the right project, they want to have skin in the game ultimately, right? So not only does it make sure that this person feels truly incentivized, they're going to do the right thing for the project because they ultimately have a financial gain in the long term, that has become supremely important for everybody. Now, there's a flip side to that. It's making it hard to get the best talent back out. So I think everybody realized in the last bull run that people were going from, one way we're earning 200 grand and then 6 months later they're getting offered 400, 450K. That's hard for a young person to turn down if they need to buy a house and a car and go on holiday. So where we have flipped this time is we are hooking them in on normally fairly long vesting schedules to say, look, you're here, but you're here for 4 years. And I think that has become excellent for many projects. If you get it right, that token compensation is extremely important. A lot of the young talent in crypto, they're trying to really hit a home run. The salary is one thing, but that real to the moon back end potential is what a lot gets them out of the bed ultimately in the morning. So I think that it has completely shifted where, when we're in the traditional markets, you're talking a base salary and a cash bonus and some healthcare or whatever. Crypto has definitely gone way beyond that and is looking to make sure that people are truly incentivized and will not be poached in the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months for the right project, especially at the senior end. We do spend a fair amount of our time at C-suite, I would say. So that has become absolute key. And these are typically people that are leading go-to-market strategies that are very strong on tokenomics, marketing, growth, ecosystem management. All of those spaces have become the hardest to find talent, even more so than engineering, if I'm being honest. So that is where we have really had a lot of success to make sure that we're bringing the best of the best, and then as such, they get ultimately access and they have a piece of the pie. It's It's very interesting. It's good and bad for me. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, talent retention has always been a challenge. I think structuring the package correctly and all that makes sense. You mentioned, I mean, you guys are working at the C-suite level. At the junior level, are you sort of seeing similar challenges where people don't have that experience? They're trying to get into the industry.
Junior's a little different. I think there's probably more willingness to bring in those that have a more TradFi background, that have, bought into crypto when they're at university and have always kept a real interest on it. There is absolutely a need for us to upskill at this point as an entire industry. Like, we will get to the point where you end up really just the highest bidder is taking the best talent. So I think that we have to supplement that with talent coming from TradFi. That's where we've seen more at the junior end. We have seen guys that maybe have had limited, if any, professional exposure, but they are truly passionate about the space. And whether they're on the accounting side, they're a lawyer, marketing, engineering, I have seen vastly more projects step up and move that. And that comes, I think, with a bit of maturity in the market. A few years ago, we didn't really have HR or onboarding or anything like that. It was predominantly guys going, we got to go. We're definitely maturing, I think, as a space. And even from like the human resources, we do a lot of strategic HR, I suppose I would call it, but very focused on that onboarding piece. What is the candidate's experience for the first 2 weeks, 4 weeks? And that can be guys saying, I still don't have a laptop. I still haven't met the CEO. I'm not sure where he is, versus the other projects where day one, he sits down with everybody at C-suite, he's in with HR, and he understands the business reporting lines, what we're trying to achieve, and most importantly, what the culture is in there. I think culture organizationally is more important in crypto than many, because it's a constant startup environment, right? You spend a lot of time, obviously, you know what it's like. You are maybe fighting fires more than you might in a traditional market in the funds industry. So we need people that are comfortable in that culture. And that isn't always the easiest, because in my experience, many people think they want to go into the fire and deal with that, but actually being there at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night isn't as much fun. So I think that there is a lot of runway here for the bigger projects in particular to make sure that we are consistently upskilling and bringing in traditional guys from the traditional markets, and then supplementing that with the absolute best in class. But HR training and onboarding does play a factor in that, and it hasn't always been the easiest. But we're maturing. I will definitely say that things have changed. And I think so many lessons have been learned in the last few years, where all of the projects that we work with, they want to be out and ahead of these issues. They understand that the talent bottleneck ultimately might be the problem that stops this project getting off the ground. So everybody is now acting accordingly to make sure that they're doing the right things to get the best people. Coinbase are one of the most interesting examples. Like, they have the absolute best people. They always do. From what I read that Brian Armstrong signs off on every single hire, I think, still at this point, as the CEO from a cultural fit perspective. And I bang the drum a lot, but culture is king in this space. It really is. And I think that can tie to many things. But I had a conversation with the CEO recently, and he said that in his hiring, and he's been in this space, I think, 12 years at this point, he said, very rarely do we find the perfect fit, but I like to bring people in that have the potential. If the work ethic's there, if the crypto knowledge is there, we don't need them to know absolutely everything. And that's, I think, that disconnect where we're maturing to say, well, let's bring people in. They bring excellent experience, but we also will upskill them to an extent. That, I think, will also be very important for the industry moving forward, versus we give you tokens, we give you cash, go. Let's look at maturing and starting to bring in and ultimately train people. That is not always the easiest. And I will say, when you are in a startup environment and things move so quickly, I do appreciate myself having been in that it's not always the easiest to take the time and on board, but we have matured. And I think that 2025 may well be the year that we see a real shift forward in terms of maturity of the market, from all of that, from a cultural onboarding perspective and various others.
No, I definitely agree. I think culture is king. And this year, you've mentioned the talent shortage, and we're seeing it as well with our hiring, finding those people, finding the right folks. And then, I mean, a lot of the time it's work ethic, sort of personality fit, and then you upskill them very quickly.
Exactly.
you do a lot of interviews, you speak to a lot of people. I think it's probably a lot of people who want to get into the crypto industry that are listening to this. Mm-hmm. If you're a young accountant, young marketing person, whatever, you do a lot of those first interviews.
Yeah.
What are you looking in at there for someone to actually get a foot in the door?
I mean, it's similar things. I mean, interpersonal skills are key in any role, to be honest with you. I still maintain, with the exception of rocket scientists and a few others, interpersonal skills will go a very, very long way. Humility is one that might be lacking. If you are ultimately pivoting to a new market, then there has to be an element of understanding that you are the new kid on the block. So, and I see this split down the middle. There are those that come to me and say, I will do anything to get into crypto. Great. That's someone that's coming at this from the right view, right? That understands they maybe don't have the professional experience, but they have the personal interest. They've maybe traded some crypto, whatever, in the past, but they truly want that from a professional capacity. Absolutely, we're always happy to have that conversation. It depends. There is a degree of some projects, it would be unfair for us to hire someone in that didn't truly know the space, because they probably would sink just given the speed at which the organization moves. But some of the bigger businesses have become very strong on that. I mean, for instance, actually, some of our clients have now built onboarding basically themselves internally to say, well, here's several modules. We want you to sit for the first few days, learn everything crypto, and then come back. And then we're more comfortable to sit you in front of a client and let you run off. So I think that is probably the most important piece from my side of things, I would say.
Okay. No, that's good to hear, and it's good to see sort of the industry maturing and getting to that level.
I think so, yeah. And there's lots of other things. I mean, there are many courses out there. I'm not always a fan of every extracurricular, but I think if you are breaking into a new market, to be able to sit in front of someone and say, well, look, I've got my job day to day, but actually every weekend for the last 6 months, I've been learning up on blockchain basics. I've done intro courses. It shows me that there's a genuine reason for wanting to do this, and you're prepared to put the work in. You do get those that maybe are a bit more intrigued by remote working and token packages. That's not always the reason that we are looking for, but we do have to, as an industry, think about it, right? Like, we've spoken it so many times. There's only so much talent in the world of crypto right now. So we are getting to the point where we have a decision as an industry to make. Do we consistently fight and push the salaries higher, which I'm fine with, or do we start supplementing and bringing in the traditional guys and just ensuring that training is there? And I think there'll be a blend. It has to be project specific. It has to be the right time for both parties. And I have seen some struggle where if they lack that knowledge, to be dropped into a startup, it is an unforgiving place. That there aren't processes in HR and teams to take you aside. So it's a bit of a sink or swim. So I think anyone that is ultimately stepping in has to be thick-skinned and ready for a little bit of a challenge. And most importantly, to know that you will take calls on a Saturday and a Sunday from your clients.
Yeah. I can second that. I always have calls with them. But I agree with you. I think with interviews, just basic initiative differentiates people. Have you read up about DAO? Do you know what a foundation is? Have you set up your own wallet?
Yeah.
You're already different than
the vast majority, right? Yeah.
So that's basic things, but very big things.
Absolutely.
I want to get into some of the really operational stuff with you now.
Sure.
So you do a lot of interviews. What are sort of some red flags that you look for when you're screening candidates?
Entitlement is normally the number one. I think that confidence is always key, right? And you do need that element. But for myself, humility is the most important piece, because self-awareness from anybody coming in and saying to me, like, I know I don't know everything about that, but I have a very good basic understanding and I'm very much willing to work hard. Brilliant. I mean, the reality is that's all we're looking for. Same as my clients, the projects are looking for, because someone that's prepared to come in and work hard, I would take that over the ego anytime, if I'm being honest with you. And I think that, Cayman specifically, right? We have so much incredible talent on this island. It's ridiculous in some respects. The amount of accountants and lawyers and fiduciary professionals is just off the chart. So we have an opportunity to pull a lot of these people in, but there's various ways we look at it. I think self-awareness and humility, do they understand that there is a skills gap there? And yes, we do hope that they say that. It's the ones that perhaps say, no, I know everything. That always leaves me a little concerned straight off the bat. But that, through the interview process, I mean, I dare not count how many people I've interviewed in my career. We'll leave that for another time. But reading this people side of things, I mean, I have been a big believer for many years that between the personality sense check, and this comes back to the cultural piece again, that cultural fit is very important. And through the process, our processes are a lot more intense in crypto than they are in any other. So what I mean by that is we typically will go through 5, 6, 7 rounds of interviews for a crypto project where you will meet everybody, including the founders and everybody in between. In traditional markets, it's not the same. You might get half an hour at a coffee shop and then a job offer. That can work, and that's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily address culture and cultural fit. And that's different if you're a big business and there's thousands of you don't have those same issues, which is fair enough. Culture is key. So understanding a person, their reasons, their motivations, their hobbies, their interests, do they need to be traveling all the time? Do they want to do events? It's really about painting that picture of the human and why are they doing this? What is the reason behind this? And red flags, if it's purely a financial decision, oh great, I just want to work remotely, Gavin. Fair enough, that there's other ways we can do that. This is maybe not the industry for you. So it's about getting to know the person. And again, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. Like I do know a vast majority, I would say, of the people in this space, and we can piece together very quickly who you are as a person. And that can be everything. I mean, I had a client that pulled an offer because we were going through this, and it came up at the time that lovely person. They were a really smart person, but they weren't very nice to a lot of the junior people in the business and behind closed doors. And I was impressed because the CEO fired them on the spot, said, I will not have that in the business. It impacts the culture in a way that I cannot have. And it was incredible because post that, and I will say he was not our candidate, just to be clear, we followed up thereafter. But it was very interesting to see the impact on a negative way that he had. People were afraid to speak up. The junior staff wouldn't ask questions. And when we flicked in and put in someone else, it changed the whole team dynamic, and people are getting promoted and everyone's putting their hand up. There's learning and development opportunities. So it is incredible to me how the right personality fit has more impact in this sector, I would say, than most. Ultimately, that cultural piece is key. And that really running through the interview process and making sure you're spending time to get to know the person, their motivations, where do they want to go in the world, that is key here. And I think bigger businesses can afford to take, if you're a Big Four audit firm, you can afford to take a few people and it's not going to be the end of the world. If there's 5 people in a project with limited money at the end of the day, it's very important that we're not bringing in the wrong person and wasting cash on this person, but most importantly, the rest of the founding team's time when time is of the essence. So it's important through that process that from the start, there is clear conditions as to what's the expectation of the role, what is the culture of the project like, and follow that up by having this person sit and meet as many people as is physically possible throughout that project. That way we get to the end, they know everybody involved, who they're working with, and then it's just a case of getting the numbers where we need them to be.
Okay. I mean, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, you've sort of mentioned 5, 6 interviews for a candidate.
I know.
What do you normally see? Is it sort of interviews with most of the big decision makers, your direct report, and a practical? Yep. Or so, what would you say is a successful process?
There's a little bit of variance, but I would always advise any client, particularly in the startup world, to say, the CEO would normally be a last cultural sense check kind of thing, and depending on time availability. But immediate line manager is always round 1. The person that this person will ultimately report to and rub shoulders with day to day. That's the most key relationship. Thereafter, depending on the size of the business, we would normally do the layer above, or CEO, CTO, depending if it's technical, and then always bring in as a final someone that would be a peer. That's not an interview. It's very much a get to know them because you will be shoulder to shoulder. It really is a case of ensuring that on a cultural perspective, this person hears from everybody what's expected of them, what their experience has been like in the role, what their experience has been like, because it's an exchange of information. And I think that the interview, it goes both ways. I tell every client this, that the candidate is interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. I think early days, a lot of projects fail to understand that, whereas again, running through this cycle, there's been a lot more savvy hiring experiences. I'm not going to let me cut that. I'm not going to use that word for a various reason, but I'll tell you otherwise. There's been a lot of, it's a great word as well, and I can't think of another one. It's been a lot of clever plays, right? So like the talent strategy side of things, in order to retain them here, and I don't mean just in Cayman, I mean globally in all things blockchain, you have to be giving them learning and development opportunities. I think you have to show them a path to progression. I think you have to incentivize them on the cash and token side of things. And we ultimately need to make sure that they are the right cultural fit. And frankly, the only way to do it is to ensure that they meet as many people so they themselves have a really clear indication as to what the people are like. We've done various, I mean, some can go very intense and, you know, bring them to a social event to see how do they interact with the team. That could be trickier with remote businesses, as we know, but there has been so many different plays from clients to try and maximize that. But for us, references and a strong interview process where they meet as many people as possible is key. It's very different to some of the other industries. And if you're recruiting in TradFi, you don't have that time a lot of the time. Like a lawyer will be disappearing very quickly, whereas crypto want to take the time to make sure that the person is the right fit. Keeps me on my toes, if I'm being honest.
Well, I like it, especially the peer or someone at the same level. I mean, I can think about some of my previous interviews. If I'd spoken to someone at that same level, that for me is valuable as a candidate.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's maybe where it gets lost in translation. Like it should be valuable for both. And some, there's a red flag to an extent. I mean, we've seen this with some, if they don't want you to meet certain people or they won't share certain information about the project, that's a red flag. And it goes both sides. So not only do we have red flags for candidates, I would say I have more red flags for clients, if I'm being honest with you. And that's, take from that what you will. But we do only work with well-funded projects that typically have some sort of real-world use case as well, to be honest. That's typically where you're fallen. No pump and dump, I will say that. We do not get involved. But I think it is a big question mark for me, for everybody, I think, in the space as to how 2025 goes. It's good to be a recruitment consultant, I guess, but I do think that we are all falling now into the trap of everybody has lots of cash at their disposal. The VC money is flying around the market, as we all know. So it's just driving up prices. And I think the most important piece to having a good recruiter is having someone that knows the market, that can ultimately find you value for that money, and someone that has actually been there, done that before. Particularly when we talk, I mean, go to market, the amount of tokens being launched at the moment. If I hear pre-TGE one more time, I might have a breakdown. But it's so important. Like, it's make or break for the project at that point. That is typically the space that we like to operate in, because we actually make such a difference to the project. And it's a very different relationship for us. Like, we do become very close to our clients and spend time with them socially and do the Christmas parties and all of this kind of stuff. So we have become, in many projects, really an extension of their HR function and become their talent acquisition. The reason that we do that is, and I do work just myself with these projects, it means that we can actually go out and cover everybody. So rather than it being a race past the post, which it typically can be, I'm ultimately there to say, well, yeah, look, we've got 3 people that we could hit, but let's pause and go out and make sure that we've actually covered every single corner and have left no stone unturned. It comes from my training in London, right? That's how we were always approaching things. And it has unlocked unbelievable value. I mean, we spoke about some of the placements that I've made recently, and yes, we could have filled the role in a couple of weeks. We took 3 months, 4 months nearly, but we got someone that, frankly, none of us even thought we could get over the line. So it is out there, and I think it's there's not many industries I've ever worked in my career where the right talent can unlock so much value for the project, particularly like the tokenomic side of instance, for instance. Like, there's not a huge pool of talent globally that's actually very good at doing this and done that, been there. Those that have are in huge demand at the moment. It's insane, to be honest with you. And some of the offers that are out there, it would blow your socks off, if I'm being honest.
I've seen some of those offers, and I think it speaks to the need in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You were talking about 2025 market coming. I know you just expanded your team.
I did.
You mentioned Ben.
I did.
What's your hiring process like? What did Ben go through?
God, we should have brought Ben in for that, huh? Shout out to Mr. Bailey. I'm sure Ben will tell you himself. So I spent a bit of time. I met Ben maybe 25 times over about 18 months. It was just me at the time, right? So like it was a bit of a different hiring process, very small. So we met many times. We did dinners, we did lunches. I got to know him. I asked around the market about him. But I heard phenomenal things at all points. And to be honest, I was really impressed with him. I came up against him and a couple of others. My industry is quite helpful at that because I will see who's good ultimately in doing what they do. But him and I got on well. He's a football fan. He is a Liverpool fan, but we won't hold that against him. And it's been a great change for me. I mean, I was getting a little bit lonely maybe and needed some help as the business expanded. And Ben has worked on some of the biggest projects in the US and Canada, has filled devs off the chart in terms of technical. And it was a long drawn out process, if I'm being honest with you, but I had to make sure that he was the right guy because it's different when you're at that size. I think the bigger the business gets, the easier it becomes to absorb talent, of course. But I have to say he really impressed me throughout the process, and it was maybe a bit over the top from my side of things, but no, he's been a great hire. In 18 months of get to know you, how you operate, you know, what do you want to do in the world, where do you want to go? I think him and I have always been very much on the same page in that. So I'm sure he'll tell you otherwise, but it was a drawn out process.
No, I mean, that's why I wanted to ask the question. It's interesting to see the guy who does this as a living, appointing someone on the process you follow.
I know, don't take my advice.
Well, I mean, I think it says a lot that you spend so much time. I think that's one of the problems is you see people like, we need someone, we'll take them. First person, you just take them.
Yeah, it's my number one bugbear in the market. And to be honest, that is a lot of the time that's when recruiters come in. I mean, a lot of the time I'll be pulled in and say, like, you know, we've had our HR function, talent acquisition function, been working this role for a while. They haven't been able to find anyone, so we need someone tomorrow. I prefer to come in at the start of that process to say, look, I get that, but let's make sure and complement HR and TA. So I'll work offline, they can work online, and we ultimately together can make sure that we've covered the entirety of the market. But it depends. My take is that projects that have been in the space for a long period of time, the longer you're in this space, the more you value talent because you understand there isn't a lot. So I think that we typically see this from our clients, that those that are new, they're maybe a little naive in terms of they think, well, we've just raised tons of money, so this will be easy. No, it won't. Just because you've got money, that's one piece of the pie. There's a lot of other parts like we discussed about branding and what does the project do, etc. So it makes it very complex for everybody. And I think that, I mean, 2025, and I mentioned it earlier, we plan to hire another few, to be honest, to try and keep up with this growth that is coming. I don't know how we all will, to be honest. You and I might have some sleepless nights. But my hope is that as the market matures, particularly from the Cayman sense, right, we look at it and think, well, and it's not just crypto. Like, we've had some really unique projects coming down here, like that hit AI and various other types. It's not just that. So I think as an island, we have so much to pull businesses in. And I had this conversation with someone that they could not fathom the level of service providers like yourselves. Like, I mean, it's incredible, to be honest, from a blockchain perspective, how far we've come in the last few years. So I think we are ultimately set at this point, hopefully, to run away with it. And I think, like, globally speaking, you know, we Switzerland's still there or thereabouts. We hear about Dubai. I would say that proximity to the US, time zone in particular, time zones are the number one difficulty in crypto, right? Like, we can hire people anywhere in the world, but if they're in Australia, it's not easy to get them.
Someone's up late and someone's up very early. Yeah.
Like, that is really the only logistical issue. And that has become why I think, from our perspective in Cayman, I don't really know where else you would go. You can go, and I actually had a client that chose Dubai over here, and he said, it's like, I live like a vampire. I'm up all night, every night, because everybody's in the US. I can't do this. I'm coming back. So I do think time zones are probably the only issue, but the heartbeat, like all the biggest projects that we work with are in San Francisco and New York. They are in a different level. And I remember people telling me that they were both dead during COVID, but I can assure you they are definitely not. But that proximity, you know, we can direct flight into New York. Okay, we don't have SF, but you can get to LA and go up. I think that this place will be very difficult to compete with if you are a crypto project. I am, of course, biased, as I'm sure you are, but from a talent perspective, I mean, Switzerland is probably the number one, I would say, competition from my perspective. It can be easier if you're building a bigger business, but I think that time zone piece will always keep us in the lead. And hopefully everything continues as it is for next year.
Oh yeah, no, I'd say also very bullish on Cayman. I think we've got a great service offering.
Yeah.
You've placed a lot of people, and we've seen more and more folks coming to Cayman in person, like physically moving to Ireland.
Big change.
I mean, I'm sure you've taken a bunch of people through that. How hard is it? What do people need to consider if they want to physically come to Cayman?
It's expensive. Like, it is expensive. I think that we can't get away from that. I mean, I don't think it's that expensive when you consider the tax savings, but I do believe that it's a long way away. I mean, you know, I'm from Scotland originally, so for us to get home, it's a couple of flights, right? And it's, you know, South Africa, we'll not even talk about how long it takes you to get home. But I do think that cost of living is a concern for some. To be honest, though, it has been very interesting because the election happened, and it was the US election, and it was like just boom, all of a sudden, project after project saying, yeah, we're coming there, but not just to set up. We need boots on the ground. And I think the ultimate truth, right, we all can see coming that the regulatory landscape is going to develop over the next year or two. And I think every client I have is wise enough to say, we need to have physical boots on the ground. It's predominantly very senior people. It's not, well, that's not true. We've had a couple of AI engineers actually relocate to the island just recently. Some very cool projects in the deep machine learning side of things. But for the most part, you are bringing C-suite, you know, at board and director level. It can be done. There's the usual family reasons and children and all that kind of stuff, the emotional tie that comes into it. But the one thing I've always disagreed with is when people tell me that you can't get talent here, I disagree fundamentally with that. I think that, A, the level of talent that's here will blow your mind. And if we absolutely cannot find someone here, it's fairly straightforward to relocate. Things have changed. Like, the world economy has, I would say, changed a bit. I mean, we see it in real time, but you know, from healthcare issues to logistics and school fees rising, cost of living still rising, we are a very attractive proposition and very safe, incredible school system, like one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's a very, very compelling proposition, I should say, for many. So we've done it. I mean, in the last 6 months, I honestly have lost count at how many we've brought in here. Predominantly not from the US, I would say, just for various reasons. But the interest in the last 12 months, and that not even just crypto, but it has been incredible, you know, with the Labour government coming in the UK, the Canadian market. It's incredible to see how the Cayman is on the tip of everybody's tongue. And I think that for me, the number one issue is probably how do we continue to cope with that growth? I think that's the same for everybody here, but it's a very good problem to have. And I think that the amount of opportunities that this will open up longer term, because the projects, yes, they're bringing in the senior, but they're also looking to build in a little bit of the team underneath. So it's going to open up so much opportunity, you know, for particular young kids coming out of college here, etc., young Canadians. Come and talk to me. Like, let's talk about how we get you into crypto, because you don't need to be a software developer. There's a lot to be done in marketing, business development, partnerships, ecosystem growth. Let's talk about that stuff as well. And I think we have a real chance to really run this right. And I hope that it continues like it is. But the talent piece, it blows my mind. There is so much here. You can bring so much in very quickly. And you know, we have like Cayman Enterprise City and Tec Cayman, like they can turn around permits like that. You know, it's very impressive how we have set that up. And I have had that conversation with a few clients that got a bit frustrated with other jurisdictions, just in terms of timelines. They were in a bit of a hurry, and Cayman did it like that for them. So we have a lot to offer, and I think for us, it's just about continuing. How we keep up with the growth is, I think, everybody's major problem from what I understand at the moment, but that's a great problem for everyone to have.
Yeah, no, I think coming to Cayman is easier than a lot of folks think. Setting it up, getting the work permit, coming here, I mean, very first world living. I think you always see people being surprised. Like, we thought it was a little desert island with no one there.
And the restaurant quality here, I mean, these days, the hotels, the healthcare system, the roads, I am told, are incredible compared to some. So they're definitely better than where I'm from. So I think that we have so much to offer. It really is the case of, come and speak to me. We'll talk about getting you here. But the one thing I do think that we have a massive opportunity for, and something that we're actually going to be doing a bit more in the new year, is that there is a lot of opportunity to get grads, etc., out of school and college to get into these spaces. And a lot of it's actually now going to be here. So they don't have to go to the US or the UK. They could stay here, stay with a family, and really build themselves a really cool career in a space that I don't know where we'll go in the next 10 years.
I think that's one of the big unlocks for Cayman.
100%.
If you're born here, I mean, with this new way of working, you don't need to leave here.
No.
You can stay in Cayman, work remotely, have an amazing international career, work with some of the biggest companies in the world.
Unbelievable, the level of projects is unbelievable here. I mean, we've some of the top 5 or 6 in the world, I would say, probably, right? So that opportunity is just unbelievable. And I think that there is an element of irony, I think, that the number one skill shortages in everything that we find are normally business development, partnerships, marketing, ecosystem growth type roles. So we've got a lot of people here. Those roles are very easy to step into, right? Personality, a little bit of hard work. So, and I think that 2025, we will do a bit of work on that. And I actually will tie you in on that at some point, because there is a lot of opportunity to get these kids involved. And I think coming out of college in particular, to be able to come out and sit and see these projects that are all here on your shores, that's very, very, very cool, I have to say. And I'm excited to be able to make that work.
No, I mean, it's an opportunity that's overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah,
so
I think so.
Cool to see.
I think so many of them just think that, you're either a developer or you're not. And
that's it.
That's just a small part of it. And with AI, to be honest, I think that the partnerships and marketing side of things will be much harder than engineers in the next few years. So hopefully we can help make Cayman onto the floor on that.
Business is still a business. Someone needs to go out there, win the work, bring it in.
Tell me about it.
One of the things I wanted to go back to is you mentioned you guys do strategic HR advice in terms of structuring. I mean, this is very decentralized, very flat structures.
Yeah.
What do you sort of focus on over there? What are some of the challenges you're seeing? Because I'm seeing my teams sort of and clients grow out.
Yeah.
And it is different than any traditional business.
I do think that, I mean, we're a remote business, and I think about this quite a lot. I'm sure you've had the same thought. Of course, having people sat shoulder to shoulder in an office, there is benefit there. I'm not going to lie about that. We have this conversation regularly with our clients, and time zones aside, which we touched upon earlier, most of them are very confident and comfortable hiring anywhere. The key to that is communication. Slack is the bane of my existence, if I'm being honest with you. But I think that strong people managers are key. You need someone, if you're managing a remote team, you have to trust them, and you have to be a good people manager and ultimately instill autonomy in them. But that all comes back to you hiring the right person at the start. There's very few people in my experience that you could bring in that are going to go on holiday for 6 weeks and not actually do any work in this space. The strategic HR piece, it is predominantly US, Canada, Europe. We're advising how to set up structurally in terms of what's the best org chart and how do we set up the engineering team. Why are we losing people across the sales function? Can we change and can we split that function into like outbound and inbound, that kind of a thing, combined with comp-and-bens. So the compensation and benefits piece, it is getting a little out of control. I will say that for the best people. But our ultimate view is to ensure that we keep things as consistent as possible. So I think in the previous cycle, what I saw, it just didn't matter. Like people just like get the guy in, it's fine. We've got money. This time there's been a lot more maturity to say, well, let's build a structure for the business and say onboarding, HR, salary bandings are now becoming a thing, which has never really happened, to be honest with you. I've had multiple projects say that to me. We can't just get into this issue, because the one problem I've seen is, depending on where in the cycle you joined the project, that obviously directly correlates to maybe where you're landing from a numbers perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, people at the Christmas party will have a couple of beers and maybe discuss what they earn. So we have done a lot of work to try and tie this back to say, look, over the last 3 years, we've been a bit all over the place. We have to condense and bring this into a consistent level. You will lose some talent in that piece. That's just part and parcel of it. But that consistency has created a much more harmonious environment across the board. Again, it's back to that cultural piece where everybody should feel cohesively involved in this. Everyone knows what they're doing. Everybody knows what we're trying to achieve here. And most importantly, everybody knows what the comp and bends looks like and what that ultimate package looks like. Because I've come from a recruitment background with, you know what everybody earns. It's on a board what they do, right? So I am a big believer in, you should be transparent. I don't see why you would be hiding from various members of staff what they earn unless there is an issue. That has been an area we've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months. I think there's been a lot of issues with, and I get it, no judgment, because if you're in that moment and you need that person to deliver, sometimes your hands are tied and you just have to pay what the market dictates at that point. But we're getting to the point where, as I say, trying to find consistency and a little bit more structure, and always balancing that with salary and then a very healthy token package to make sure that they're hooked long term.
Well, so this is an interesting one for me, because when you've got remote teams, people in different jurisdictions, I mean, salary levels will be very different.
Yes.
Cayman's cost of living is a lot more expensive than South Africa, for example.
Yes.
So what do you see there? All packages denominated in dollars, or adjustment for where you're physically based?
This happened like with Google and all the big boys years ago, right? It's like, if you want to get a software developer, and people used to go to India and they would think they would save money. Now, if you go and do that, you pay fairly similar as to what you would. Good devs are good devs. Good crypto talent's good crypto talent. My view is, you're smart if you live in South Africa and earn that salary. I do think it's probably like split directly down the middle. The true crypto projects that we work with, the L1s and L2s, they don't differentiate. The salary is a salary. You choose where you live. If you want to be in San Francisco, cool. You want to be in South Africa, cool. Just about the time zone. We work EST or PST, you will be online. It's a big issue for everybody, if I'm honest. But I think we are at the point now where talent is talent. And crypto, in the next year or two, if it continues to grow like this, it won't matter where they are. People will pay them. So I think at the moment you can still get away. We have a lot of clients that will pay localized salaries. It can be an issue long term, but you will get away with it in some respects. It depends on the jurisdiction. Never hire in the Netherlands. Been there, done that. Intense, if I'm being honest. A lot of tax obligations. But it really comes down to how good are the people coming in and how badly do you need them, right? So a lot of this is specifics at the time. And I mean, the difference between bringing, a junior accountant in to help the team, or a junior dev, versus bringing in the head of tokenomics or a CEO, it's a different thing. But I do think we see a very much a 50-50 split. And it's definitely changing, whereas talent becomes more and more hard to come by. If you have a guy and he's sat in South Africa and you think, oh, I need him, a lot of the people are beginning. They might not get all the way there, but it's becoming a very interesting topic. I've had this chat, I mean, about 10 times in the last 3 weeks, with people asking me, like, do I really need to pay him that if he's there? But it's like I say to them, well, but what if the guys down the road say they'll pay him that, but he still stays there? All right, well, we'll pay it then. So that is the problem, right? You have just a constant threat of your talent being poached. So it's becoming tricky. It is, to an extent, specific within the harder to find disciplines, I would say. So again, back to the marketing, the ecosystem growth, the community relations type stuff, it's very difficult to get those people. So traditionally now, we'll pay wherever we need to pay to get them. We'll relocate you wherever you want, is typically the view. But again, it does come down to a certain extent specifics on the project at the time.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. So to wrap things up, I mean, we always ask this question. Looking at 2025, looking at this industry, what are you excited about at the moment?
I love the intersection of AI and crypto. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in there. We have 2 or 3 projects that we're working on right now that have all raised Series A, getting to Q1. So we have, I think, 60 roles coming from them. So it's very unique. But the coolest thing for me is like the kind of TradFi and new finance clashing in Cayman. And I mean, some of the like the tokenization of real world assets, the links with reinsurance. I think all of that stuff and how the new school and the old school mesh together, that's actually the area I find the most interesting. I think everybody will grow, there will be winners and losers, but that really cool intersection and some of the projects that we're working with there, some really big stuff going on there. And I have to say we are very excited for 2025. There's some really big stuff coming, and I think Cayman will genuinely be at the heartbeat of all of that moving forward. So big year. What about for yourself? I get to ask you one question, right?
Oh, okay. What am I excited about? I'd say excited. I'm very bullish on Cayman. I'd agree with you there. I think I see a lot of growth. I think we've built the infrastructure. That's where we differentiate ourselves from a lot of our competitors. Is you can come here and company can be set up quickly. You can have the support and everything else can be running. Others, there's work. You have to go find the talent almost. I think 100%. We've built the out-of-the-box system here. To throw it back to you, not to only focus on the positive, what are you concerned about or what worries you for the next few years?
Talent.
Okay.
I know, I mean, it's silly to say, right? Unless you fool me, but it is tricky. I mean, like, I some of the offers out there these days for these guys are incredible. I mean, you're talking 20, 25 million over a couple of years. So trying to convince them that some of these smaller projects with maybe a little less funding are the play, that will be tough. And I do hope that the best projects do make it. I think that the tax side of things is also a bit of a train coming down the tracks in some respects. I've had a number of conversations with projects that I think it's an interesting piece where, you know, remote working, employer of records is a big, big thing. I don't know how the IRS will feel about that in the next kind of couple of years. So that I've had these conversations with CFOs and GCs to say, does this ever come up? And I actually was at a talk with the Deloitte guys, and they mentioned it quite extensively as a red flag coming down the line. And I thought, So I do think that many projects, particularly the bigger boys that are well funded, need to be doing the right things, tax planning, ensuring that there is separation of lab and foundation, you know, that some of the more basic stuff. But I think post FTX, there's been a lot more maturity in the market. I don't know if you would agree, but I think lessons were maybe learned then. That's my only real concern, is the lack of talent will become trickier to get them out of these projects as everybody learns to tie them in. And then we have that other side of things. But for the most part, supremely positive about the whole thing, if I'm honest. Dare I say excited.
Ready for it as well. Yeah. Well, Gavin, it's been a pleasure. If people want to learn more about you, the Tec Rec, where should they be going?
They can reach out to me on WhatsApp, Telegram, email. I'll drop all kinds of comments in once we get this out live, and they can reach out to me anytime.
Brilliant. So people can find all of the info there. We'll have it in the description as well. Gavin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I will speak to you soon.
Definitely.
Gentlemen.
Cheers.